My name is Leah Morgan. I'm 34 years old. The night I opened the restaurant, I had spent 3 years building. My entire family skipped it for my brother's poker night, left 9 empty seats in the middle of my dining room, and let me keep looking at the door like an idiot until closing. And by 8 o'clock the next morning, I had 76 missed calls. And my mother's first voicemail was telling me, "Don't sign anything." The worst part was not that they missed it. The worst part was that I kept believing they might still come. I had reserved 9 seats at the long table by the front window. Best view in the room, white candles, navy linen, little handwritten place cards I had made myself because some stupid, hopeful part of me still wanted the night to feel like family had shown up for me the way families in normal stories do. Mom, Dad, my brother Evan, his wife Claire, my Aunt Denise, my cousin Tara, my Uncle Mike, Grandma June's chair, too, even though she had passed the year before. I set that one anyway with a small vase beside it, because she was the only person who had ever looked me in the eye and said, "When you open your place, don't make it smaller just because your family is." So I didn't, at least not physically. The place was called Hearth and Finch. 42 seats, warm wood, soft lighting, open shelves with jars of preserved lemons and dried herbs, a pastry case up front, and a dinner menu I had written and rewritten until it sounded like the life I wanted. Not flashy, not trendy, honest. Roasted chicken with brown butter, braised short rib, good soup, better bread. The kind of restaurant people return to because it feels like somebody actually meant it. I built it from nothing. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. I started with a food truck that leaked in summer and stalled in traffic. Then pop-up dinners. Then weekend catering. Then 2 years of saving every extra dollar while my parents kept saying things like, "It's cute that you still want to cook for a living." And my brother kept asking if I was ever going to do something scalable. Evan was 2 years younger than me and had been treated like a visiting prince since birth. If I worked, I was stubborn. If he talked, he was strategic. If I was tired, I was moody. If he was tired, he was under pressure. The whole family adjusted itself around him the way furniture gets arranged around a television. Evan's latest obsession was poker. Not casino poker, not career poker, just weekly poker nights in my parents' finished basement, where 6 men with expensive watches and too much confidence sat around pretending bourbon and bad bluffs made them sophisticated. My mother bought special snacks for it. My father called it Evan's networking circle. His wife, Claire, acted like it was adorable. They all treated those nights like some sacred male ritual instead of what they actually were. My brother getting attention for sitting in a chair. My grand opening was on a Friday. His poker night was also on Friday. That should have been easy. It wasn't. 3 days before the opening, my mother called and said very carefully, "Honey, you know your brother already invited people." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "Mom," I said, "my opening has been scheduled for 3 months." "I know, sweetheart, but he has guests coming."
"So do I."
There was a little silence, then the sentence I should have expected. You know how sensitive Evan gets when plans change. That one sentence contained my whole childhood. My plans were flexible. My milestones were movable. My feelings were recoverable. But Evan's comfort, that was infrastructure. Dad got on the phone after that and made it worse. "We'll try to come by after," he said. "Keep it relaxed."
After.
As if the ribbon cutting, the first service, the only first opening night I would ever have was a casual barbecue I could leave warming on the stove while they watched my brother play cards. I should have told them not to bother. Instead, I said, "I'll keep seats open." That was my mistake. Opening night came fast. The room filled beautifully. The local fluorescent pays. My staff was nervous, but sharp. The first ticket came in at 5:46. At 6:10, the county councilwoman came through. At 6:20, our first walk-in table asked if the mushroom toast would stay on the menu permanently. At 6:30, we did the ribbon cutting and people clapped while I smiled for photos and tried not to keep glancing at the door. 9 seats stayed empty. At 7, I texted Mom. "Are you close?"
Red.
No answer. At 7:23, Evan posted a story. Green poker felt cigar smoke. My father laughing in the background. Caption: Friday tradition. I looked at that screen so long, one of my servers had to ask if I was okay. I said yes. Then I went back to service. By 8:15, those empty seats had become a physical ache in the room. Guests noticed. Not obviously, not rudely, but people always notice absence when it's dressed for dinner. A couple celebrating their anniversary asked if I was still expecting someone. I smiled and said, family got delayed. What I meant was, family made a choice, and I was still trying to outweigh it. By 10:30, the last dessert had gone out. By 11 o'clock, we were wiping down menus and stacking glasses. The 9-place cards were still untouched. My aunt had not come. My father had not come. My mother had not come. Evan had not come. None of them came. I turned off the lights in the front room one section at a time. Then a man in a gray coat, who had eaten quietly near the back and watched the whole service without trying to be seen, stepped toward me, shook my hand, gave me his card, and said, "Call me tomorrow. My partners want in." At 8 the next morning, my phone was drowning in missed calls. And my mother's first voicemail said, "Leah, whatever he offered you, don't sign anything." At 8 o'clock the next morning, my phone was drowning in missed calls. Not trickling, not politely accumulating, drowning. Mom, Dad, Evan, Claire, my Aunt Denise. 2 cousins who had somehow never once found time to support my opening, but had apparently discovered urgency by breakfast. Even 3 numbers I didn't recognize, which usually means somebody in the family has decided to recruit witnesses before they know the facts. 76 missed calls by the time I unlocked the screen. The first voicemail was from my mother. "Leah, whatever he offered you, don't sign anything. Call me before you do something rash." That was how I knew the man in the gray coat was real. Not because of the card in my apron pocket, because my mother's first instinct was not congratulations. Not "we're proud of you." Not even "how did opening night go," just fear. Fear has a very specific shape in families like mine. It doesn't sound like concern. It sounds like control arriving late and breathless. I played the second voicemail. "Dad, this time you need to slow down and think. We all know how these people work. Don't get dazzled. These people." My father's favorite phrase whenever someone successful appeared near me, and he needed to make ambition sound predatory. The third was Evan. Short, tight, already irritated. "Call me before you make an idiot decision." That one almost made me laugh because while they were all calling me impulsive, none of them had thought my grand opening was worth missing poker night for. But one business card and a single sentence from the right man had turned my entire family into emergency responders. I got up, made coffee, and finally took the card out of my coat pocket. Martin Hale and Roar Hospitality Partners. I knew the name. Not personally, professionally. They had money. Real money. Quiet money. The kind that bought old buildings and turned them into boutique hotels, wine bars, and neighborhood restaurants that somehow still felt intimate even after expansion. I had used one of their places as a study example when I was building my own service model. My hands actually went cold. Not because I was dazzled, because the card made the empty seats from the night before feel almost supernatural, like my family had missed the one moment in my life they could never properly laugh off again. At 8:12, while I was still staring at the card, my phone rang again. "Mom," I answered this time. She started talking before I said hello. "Do not meet with him until your father can be there." I looked out the front window of my apartment. The restaurant across the street was opening. A woman in scrubs was walking fast with a tea in one hand. Somewhere outside my own family's panic. Normal life was just continuing. "No," I said, silence. Then the offended inhale.
No, Mom.
My father was not at my opening. He doesn't get to attend the part after her voice sharpened. We had one conflict. One conflict. My brother's poker night. My first opening. One conflict. That was the family math. His habits equal. My milestones negotiable. Then she tried softness. "Sweetheart, we were going to come after." I let that sit for a second. "You didn't." Evan had guests. I had 9 empty seats. She didn't answer that.
Of course she didn't.
Empty chairs are hard to argue with. You either sat in them or you didn't. So, she changed strategy. "Your brother says men like Martin Hale don't just hand out cards unless they want control." I smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because even now, after missing everything, my brother still thought he got to narrate the business world to the woman who had actually built a functioning restaurant. Tell Evan, I said, that men like Martin Hale also usually know who in the room did the work. She went quiet then, very quiet. What did he say to you? She asked. He said to call him. And you are? Yes, Leah. Yes. I hung up before she could climb back onto the moral ladder she always reached for when she felt control slipping. At 8:24, Evan sent a text. Do not confuse attention with leverage. I read it twice. Then I typed back, do not confuse poker with a life. He didn't answer. At 9, Martin Hale called himself. No assistant, no scheduler, just him. His voice sounded exactly the way I remembered from interviews online. Calm, deliberate, with none of the empty enthusiasm people use when they want free vision before investing real money. Lee Morgan. Yes, this is Martin Hale. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I looked at the call log on my screen. No, I said, everybody else already did. That made him laugh once quietly. Good. I like people who notice a clean line when it arrives. Then he said the sentence that rearranged the whole morning. I'd like to talk about what you built. And I do mean you, not the people who failed to show up for it. I felt something in my chest go still. Because that was it. The actual wound of the night before. Not just that they missed it, that they made me feel foolish for believing they might come. Martin kept going. My partners and I stayed because the room had integrity. That's rare on a first night. I'd like to meet at 11 o'clock if you're available. I'm available.
Good.
One more thing. I waited. Bring whatever numbers tell the truth. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with my coffee going cold and the call log still glowing on my phone. Then I opened my laptop. 3 years of numbers, vendor sheets, labor percentages, menu costings, build-out debt, growth projections, private notes, the real shape of what I had built. At 9:46, my father showed up at the restaurant in person, and from the look on my opening manager's face when she called me, he was not there to congratulate me. At 9:46, my father was standing in the middle of my lunchroom like he paid for the walls. That was what my opening manager, Tessa, said when she called me, not panicked, annoyed. He's not yelling, she said. That's almost worse. By the time I got there, he had one hand on the back of a chair and the look men get when they've arrived early enough to pretend they belong. The restaurant was closed until 11 o'clock. Chairs still tucked. Sunlight coming through the front windows and long, clean bars across the floor. Bread proofing in the back. Coffee not quite ready. Quiet until he got there. He turned the second I walked in. Took you long enough. I set my bag down on the hostess stand. You weren't invited either. He ignored that. Who exactly is Martin Hale to you? There it was. Not how are you? Not we were wrong last night. Straight to access. I looked at him. Interesting question from someone who missed my opening. His jaw tightened.
Don't start with that.
I laughed once. You mean the part where you chose poker over my business? This is bigger than one dinner, Leah. No, I said it's exactly about one dinner, because people who believe in you usually show up before there's money in the
room.
That landed not with shame, with irritation. Because my father hated being described in language that removed his authority and left only his choices behind. He stepped closer. One of Evan's guests recognized Hale's name this morning. Do you understand what kind of people he works with?
I did.
That was the problem. My father thought recognition was leverage in his world. A name discovered through someone else's table automatically became family property. I'm meeting him at 11 o'clock. I said, no, we are. Actually smiled then, not because it was funny, because finally for the first time all morning he had said the quiet part out loud. We yes. You're not walking into a deal like this alone. Evan should be there, too. The door opened behind us before I could answer. Of course, it was Evan. Baseball cap, sunglasses, coffee in hand, moving like he had every right to stride into the restaurant he skipped the night before and start rearranging its future. He took off the sunglasses and looked around. Cute place in daylight. I stared at him. Cute. That was all he had for the thing I had bled 3 years into. He leaned one hip against the counter. Look, Hale is not a normal small business guy. One of the poker guys knows his attorney. You don't just walk into that blind. My voice stayed calm. Then it's good I know my own business. He smiled, patronizing already. Knowing food is not the same as knowing money. There it was. The entire family religion in one sentence. What I built counts as talent. What men say about it counts as reality. I should have thrown him out then. Instead, I asked, "Where were you last night?" He blinked. "What?" "At 78-9. While my opening was happening and your chair stayed empty." He rolled his eyes. "We already told you poker night was set." I nodded slowly. "Right, so when I needed family, you had cards, but when an investor showed up, suddenly you're all business partners." Before he could answer, my mother came in carrying a bakery box and wearing the same face she always wore when she wanted to re-enter a disaster through hospitality. "I brought muffins," she said, like sugar could launder last night. No one moved toward the box. She set it down anyway and came to me with a sad little smile. "We can still fix this." I looked at her. "Fix what?" "The tone." Her eyes flicked to Dad, then Evan, then back to me. "Last night got emotional."
Today doesn't have to.
Emotional. That word again. I had spent all morning in numbers, schedules, debt tables, and prep sheets while they flooded my phone like panicked teenagers. And somehow I was still the emotional variable in the family story. "You missed my opening," I said. She flinched this time. "Good." But before she could answer, the front door opened again. Martin Hale, gray coat folded over one arm now, white shirt, no performance in him at all. He took in the room with one look. Me by the hostess stand, my parents near the front windows. Evan already standing like an unsigned agreement in loafers. That was enough. He smiled politely. "Am I interrupting?" Dad answered before I could. "Not at all. We were just getting organized as a family." Martin's face did not change, but his eyes shifted toward me. And in that pause, I understood something important. He was not asking whether the room was tense. He was asking whether the lie had already started. I said, "Actually, we were just clarifying who thinks they're entitled to this meeting." That got very quiet. Evan muttered, "Jesus, Leah." Martin set his coat down on the nearest chair. Then, he asked one question. "Before we go any further, does anyone in this room besides Leah Morgan own any part of this restaurant?" My father answered instantly. "We all put money in." And Martin turned back to me with the calmest expression in the world and said, "That is either completely true or completely fatal. Which is it?" I did not even look at my father when I answered. "It's completely false." That changed the room faster than shouting would have. My father stiffened. My mother's hand tightened on the muffin box. Evan gave a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind men use when they think confidence can survive exposure if they make it sound casual enough. Martin did not react at all. He just nodded once and said, "Good. Then we can continue without contamination." My father stepped forward.
"Excuse me."
Martin turned to him with professional politeness, so cold it was almost elegant. "If you're claiming ownership in a business you do not own while attempting to insert yourself into an investment meeting you were not invited to, then yes, I'd call that contamination." That landed hard because men like my father can fight daughters. They can out-talk wives. They can roll right over women trained to make peace. But another man in a good coat speaking fluent authority. That language they hear. Evan tried next. "Look, nobody's claiming ownership. We're just making sure Leah doesn't get taken advantage of." I laughed once. "You missed the opening." He looked at me like I was being childish. "We're past that." "No," I said. "You're trying to get past it." "I'm not." My mother stepped in fast, the way she always did when truth was threatening to settle in the room before she could perfume it. "Last night was unfortunate," she said to Martin. "There was a scheduling conflict." "A scheduling conflict," I repeated. She shot me a warning look. That look had run my whole life. Not because it was frightening, because it promised consequences later in smaller rooms when nobody else was there to hear what really happened. But this was my room, my restaurant, my investor meeting, and suddenly I was no longer interested in helping her keep her face intact. "There were 9 empty seats at my grand opening," I said to Martin. "I kept them open for my family. They skipped it for my brother's poker night." No one spoke, not because they were shocked, because they knew it sounded exactly as ugly as it was. Martin looked at my father. Is that true? Dad gave a dismissive little shrug. We planned to come by after. That sentence hung there long enough to rot. Martin turned back to me. Do you still want them here? Such a simple question. No one in my family had ever really asked me that before. Not about dinners, not about holidays, not about my own life. Just, do you want them here? And because the answer came so fast, I knew it had been waiting a long time. No, I said. My mother blinked. Evan straightened. Dad's whole face changed. Leah. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You can leave now. Mom looked genuinely hurt, which was almost insulting after everything else. In front of him? I stared at her. You skipped my opening in front of everyone. Evan muttered. Unbelievable. No, I said, actually, this is the most believable part. Martin picked up his coat from the chair and stepped aside. Not leaving, just creating space the way people with real instincts do when they understand a line is being drawn and should not be touched. My father tried one last move. He softened his tone. That was always when he was most dangerous. You're angry, he said. Fine. Be angry, but don't make permanent decisions over one emotional night. I held his gaze. You taught me that if something matters, people show up for it. His expression flickered just once. Because he had said that to me when I was 12 and crying over a spelling bee he skipped for one of Evan's practices. I remembered it. Apparently he did, too. Then I said, you showed up for poker. You missed me. That is the permanent decision. Mom's eyes filled. Evan looked away. Dad, finally understanding that neither authority nor softness was going to get him back into the meeting, did what he always did when he lost control of a room. He went mean without family. This place won't last 6 months. I smiled at that because fear sounds pathetic once you stop calling it guidance. Then I guess it's a good thing you're leaving before noon. He stood there for 1 second too long, like maybe the room itself would correct me on his behalf. It didn't. Finally, he turned and walked out. My mother followed, crying quietly. Evan was last. He stopped at the door and said, when this goes bad, don't call me. I looked at him. I didn't call you the first time. Then the door shut. The room went still. Not awkward, still, clean, still. Martin waited exactly 3 seconds and then said, now I'm interested. Not because my family had left, because I had made them. That distinction mattered. He took off his coat, sat at table 12 near the front window, and motioned for me to bring whatever I had prepared. I pulled my laptop from my bag, laid out the vendor sheets, the margin tables, the build-out debt schedule, and the second-year expansion model I had built 6 months earlier, and then hidden from my own family because I already knew what would happen if they smelled growth before I had control. Martin read everything, not theatrically, not performatively, just carefully, the way serious people do when money is involved and ego is not the main event. Twice he asked questions about labor, once about rent escalators, once about why I had kept the dinner menu at a size smaller than the room could support. I told him the truth, because consistency survives longer than ambition when you're building from debt. That made him smile in the smallest possible way. Then, he asked the question that changed my life. If I offered growth capital, he said, would you take money or structure? I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, some founders need cash, some need insulation, you need both, but one more than the other. I knew exactly what he meant. He had seen the way my father moved into the room, the way my mother translated, the way Evan treated my business like an extension of his future if the numbers got pretty enough. He was not asking about accounting. He was asking whether I understood my real risk. Yes, I said, structure first. That was the right answer. I knew it from the way he leaned back. My partners want in, he said, but only if we build a wall around this business, strong enough that no relative can charm, guilt, or bluff their way through it later. I laughed once, quietly. That may be the most romantic thing anyone has said to me in years. That got a real smile. By 1:30, we had the beginnings of a deal. Not a takeover. Not some fake Cinderella rescue where a man in a gray coat swoops in and solves everything because he recognizes a hardworking woman in the wrong room. I hate stories like that. No, what Martin offered was better. capital for debt relief, operational mentorship, a growth line for a second location if year one targets were met, and lawyers who would make sure every percentage point had my name attached to it cleanly enough that my family would choke on the paperwork before they ever got near the register. At 2:15, after he left, I sat alone at table 12 with my hands around a cold coffee and realized I had not once checked my phone in over 3 hours. That felt like recovery. Then I opened it. 43 texts, 9 voicemails. My mother first, of course. Leah, we need to reset as a family. Reset. That was her favorite word when consequences arrived faster than apologies. Dad's message was shorter. You embarrassed your brother in front of important people. That one made me laugh out loud in the empty dining room. Not because it was funny. Because even now, after missing my opening, barging into my meeting, lying about ownership, and getting himself thrown out, my father still thought the central tragedy was Evan's dignity. Evan's text came 30 seconds later. Whatever he offered, you wouldn't have gotten it without our name opening certain doors.
Don't forget that.
That one, I answered, only because some lies deserve a clean death. You missed the opening. You weren't in the meeting. You don't own the debt, the menu, the payroll, or the room. Your name didn't open anything. It just arrived late and asked for a chair. He did not answer. My mother came by 2 days later alone. She stood inside the restaurant before service began and looked around like she had never really seen it before. Maybe she hadn't. Some people can spend years near your work and still never look at it as yours. I should have come, she said.
Yes.
She blinked like maybe she had expected softening after confession, but I was done doing the emotional upholstery work in that family. If she wanted truth, she could sit on the wooden version. She nodded slowly. Your father made it sound smaller. That's because if he said it at the right size, he'd have to live with himself differently. That made her eyes feel good. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because tears are sometimes the first honest thing left when a woman has spent decades calling one child practical, so she could keep sacrificing her to the comfort of everyone else. She asked whether she could at least have dinner there one night. I said, not yet. My father never came. Evan tried once through Claire to talk business over bourbon like we were suddenly siblings in a tasteful prestige drama. I declined politely, permanently. And the restaurant, it lasted longer than 6 months, longer than a year, longer than every prediction my family had ever made about what I would fail to sustain without them. We paid down the debt. Then we renovated the patio. Then, 18 months later, with Martin's firm backing the build, but not the soul of it, we opened a second location across town. The night before that opening, I set 10 seats at the long front table. Not 9, 10. 1 for me, 1 for the woman I had become, and 8 for the people who had actually shown up the first time. My staff, Teresa from Produce, the baker who took a risk on me, Martin and my old food truck friend Nia, who had once lent me $500 and half a freezer shelf when I was too broke to admit how close I was to folding. No family seats, no hopeful placeholders, no staged grief over absences that had already told me the truth. Sometimes the biggest change in a life is not the investment. It's the moment you stop saving chairs for people who keep choosing other tables. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. If that had happened to you, would you have let your family stay for the meeting or thrown them out the second they tried to claim part of your business? And after they skipped your biggest night for your brother's poker game, would you ever save them seats again? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to see you in the next.